This is a seed. This is the beginning of what will become a mighty tree and more. Without it, nature can't thrive, and without the right elements, the seed itself can't exist. The seed needs a nutrient-rich soil and water to germinate and begin its growth to first becoming a sapling. As the sapling is working its way upward, it's sequestering CO2 from the environment and in return feeding the soil from which it's growing. As the tree begins to grow taller and stronger, it begins to support and contribute to the ecosystem, creating oxygen, a habitat for birds, shade for various plants and mushrooms, food source for animals, helping prevent erosion through its healthy root system. It was recently discovered that a tree's own roots interconnect to the mycelial network below, which is an interconnected complex system that shares information among the surrounding trees in a sort of forest internet. This creates nature's co-op, together with the other trees, helping to affect the wind, weather, nutrient-rich soil, flourishing plants, a haven for animals, and ultimately contributing to a healthy ecosystem. This is not just a seed, and not just a tree either. It represents everything around it and all it impacts. All is interconnected. This is what I call the impact effect. What if this seed represents what's become the norm for most of humanity in everyday life, and especially in business? Imagine if our seed here were to act like many businesses and just wanted the shortest, easiest, fastest path, opting for the short term, and wanted to cut to the chase and race to get to the status of being a sapling. Now, that just doesn't happen in nature. It's not in the seed's nature to think that way. We as humans, however, can often go against our own inherent collaborative and cooperative nature and rush to the seemingly shortest, fastest, easiest solution without considering the consequences. So here's our little seed acting more like most humans, and it thinks to itself, okay, I'll make it quicker and faster. I'll just skip any need for soil. Who needs that silly soil anyway? Lord knows it's dirty and makes so much effort to push the green sapling through. So I'll just hop to it and become a tree. Well, we know that without soil, a seed can be okay for a little while, just in water, but a seed must have nutrient-rich soil to survive. Otherwise, it dies off and never gets to become a tree. When you operate from short-term thinking only, even when in crisis, it's only a matter of time until you actually, like the soilless seed, quickly sprout, but just as quickly fade away. We end up burnt out, unfulfilled, and compromised in all areas of health, relationships, businesses, government, and the environment we live in. Humanity, acting out of impulse over decades, has now created a negative impact that's taken us now to our most dire time in human history. We've lost 68% of known species on the planet in the last 50 years alone. We've lost 50% of the topsoil in the last 150 years. We've lost 3 trillion trees, and we're losing billions each year. And we need to plant 1.2 trillion. We have an epidemic of adolescent anxiety, depression, and suicide. We're continually rolling out technology without taking the necessary precautions to understand the potential results. In our everyday life, we're at a crisis point where we need to change and think differently. I was a poster child of focusing on the wrong things, and because of that, I ended up hitting bottom. Ironically, they weren't kidding when they called it the bottom line, because that's where I initially came from in my thinking, in life, and business, instead of understanding the power of impact. I was a partner in a global management consulting firm, making a significant amount of money, doing major deals around the world. I had a wife, 2 children, a multi-million-dollar home, all of the things that our society says are important. And that it all came crashing down. I got profoundly ill. I spent a couple of years bedridden, attached to an IV pole. I lost my health, my ability to work, which meant I lost my income, but most importantly, I lost my sense of identity. My identity was wrapped up in my job, in my income, in my status. Was it worth it? No, not at all. After 2 years of working with my doctors and not getting well, I realized the limitations of the paradigm I had for living my life. How I judged success was either going to help me get well or was going to lead to my death. What are the things that really matter in life? What's really important? And having realized that the life I had been living wasn't healthy for me, wasn't healthy for my family, and it certainly wasn't healthy for the planet. I shifted my thinking to the impact I could make. Rather than my bank account and the other societal metrics, otherwise, what was it all for? My first priority became asking myself, what impact can I have in the world? And I'll ask you, think about that right now. What impact are you bringing to the world? We need to get that we as human beings, organizations, and species are intrinsically intertwined. We're just like the ecosystem of a forest, a comprehensive, interconnected network to each other and to the planet. And we all need to make that shift for the survival of our species. In fact, science definitively shows us that we, humanity, will no longer be here due to the impact of climate change if we don't take care of our planet and plant at least 175 billion trees by 2030 in order to counter the excess CO2 in the atmosphere. This is because we did not adapt as we could easily have done if we had simply thought more in the long term and come from impact. Whether you embrace and believe the overwhelming data that the extremes in climate change we're now experiencing is impacted by man over time, or you choose to believe climate change is a natural cycle occurring, or you believe it's some combination of both, we have to focus on the impact we leave and adapt right now in order to counter the tides as they have been turning. Nature is definitively already demonstrating that to us through the fires, the melting polar caps, the extreme hurricanes, and so much more. If we had thought long term on impact, we may have been in a different scenario and not a race against time to save biodiversity and ourselves. Right now, we're in danger of losing the animals we love, and most of us don't even know it. It all could be and is preventable. It's a result of impact blatantly ignored, and now the rising impact of accelerating climate change. For example, we only have 7,100 cheetahs left in the wild and 3,800 tigers in the wild. Our use of chemicals and pesticides have eliminated the plants, butterflies, and other pollinators rely on, resulting in a significant loss of species. And yet, the answer is so simple. Adapt and shift to impact thinking. Then we can tell a completely different story. The truth of the matter is, businesses created systems built on short-term thinking, and it's become widely destructive. If we could just adapt and think more long-term, come from impact, we'd have win, win, win. But instead, we just cause the environments around us to suffer. Our businesses can die off as a result too. just like our metaphor of the eager seed racing to become a sapling. We're aware that 70% of Fortune 500 companies that were around 10 years ago are no longer here. Businesses could be a potential contributor to the solution instead of being part of the problem. Instilling violent acts against nature that cause so much harm, potentially leading to destruction not only of the environment around us, but of the businesses itself. Businesses driving the agenda of the world. So we need to be conscious leaders and to be thinking of impact. It can feel like we're in a violent time right now. Yes? How many would agree? However, that violence is not the answer. There are some who may even argue that it's our nature. We don't have a choice. But studies actually show that the opposite is true. Acting violently is against our very human nature. If we could step out of being reactive, take a moment, take a breath, and think in the bigger picture, we could step into nonviolence. All the scientific research from neurology, biology, psychology, sociology show we're a nonviolent species. It may seem counterintuitive and against what we've come to believe, but if we choose nonviolence, it results in a much, much, much better outcome. We're actually living more peacefully as a species than we ever have. The reality is most people every day are living in peace. We're closer to world peace than we've ever been as a species, and most people don't even realize that it's as simple as finding harmony within ourselves, with each other, and with nature. We're hardwired for nonviolence. We're wired for collaboration. We're wired for cooperation. Like seeds needing soil and water to grow, like forests need a network of trees connected to thrive, like animals need their environment around them to support them, we as human beings need each other. And if we can remember that in a moment of conflict, if we can breathe together and make different choices, actually choosing our own inherent nature rather than reacting impulsively, choosing nonviolence in our form of response, that's where we can harness the power of impact. It's time to realize that no matter your role in life, you make a difference. You make impact. You can get proactive in your impact right now in the very simplest of ways. One, you could plant trees or donate to have trees planted. Two, you could spread the word and share where you're inspired that can help spark awareness and make an impact in the world. Three, in your own world, think of how you're showing up, what choices you're making. So can you see that every action has a consequence? Every decision at play in business, every system in place impacts the other, creates a whole domino effect. It's all interconnected. My commitment is to instill in you and the world how we need to wake up and to focus on the impact we're having in the world. Let's begin to shift the paradigm together and take this from an idea into action. Literally, right now. Imagine holding that seed of a tree in your hand right now. Think of it as the seed of greatness, our TED Talk theme here. Let this not only represent making a positive, very real step forward on how you're impacting the planet, this moment forward, but be symbolic of the seeds you plant as a leader in your own life, your community, and your business. It's time to no longer lead our lives or businesses from short-term thinking or impulsiveness, but in the new way, the way of impact that matters and makes a difference. You can create that change, not someday, but now. And when you do, you'll have been an essential part of the impact effect.